Hi, this is Dan and Lexi from Dan Schultz Outdoors, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
Hey y'all, I'm Johnny.
And I'm Colleen. And we're the Keel Quest. And we want you to keep the adventures alive. Cheers.
Hey, this is Darren from Ride Paddle Repeat, encouraging you to keep the adventures alive.
This is David from Beasley Ironworks saying keep the adventures alive.
Hey, Kevin with an A here. Keep the adventure alive.
Hi, I'm Dan May I. Keep the adventures alive.
Hi, I'm Kevin Collin, the Happy Camper. Remember, keep the adventures alive. Awesome!
Woo, buddy! Shug here! Keep the adventures alive. I am.
Ethan here, the Avid Outdoorsy Guy, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
We're John and Aaron.
Keep the adventures alive.
Hey everyone, it's Kylan from Lure of the North, and I encourage you to keep the adventures alive.
This is Sky North telling you, keep the adventures alive. And now on with the show.
Well, hey, happy Tuesday evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of CanoeHound's Outdoor Adventure Show. My name is Dennis, also known as CanoeHound, and if this is your first time to the show, you've joined us for a doozy. We have a paddling legend on the show tonight that is going to be sharing all kinds of great stories and tips with you and getting to learn a little bit more about what he is all about. But before we get into that let's fulfill all of our obligations here while the chat over there continues to fill up with viewers, and then we will get on with the show. Just want to start by saying, you know what? I am 11 subscribers away from hitting that 5,000 mark, which in my opinion, for me, is a huge milestone. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button tonight. Hopefully you'll see value in it and you'll enjoy the show enough that you'll want to come back weekly on Tuesday nights to join us and take in all this stuff that has to do with the great outdoors. So we'll see if we can hit that mark tonight of 5,000. So let's see what happens. Anyways, I just want to acknowledge all of my sponsors tonight. First, a huge thank you to our good friends over at Algonquin Outfitters. It's a great outdoor store. If you ever be going up around Algonquin Park, be sure to stop in there and get yourself some equipment that you might need, or rentals, or you know what, pick their brains. They are a great bunch of guys in there and gals, and you know what, they are very knowledgeable. I know. I stopped in there this past weekend and dropped a few dollars at the cash register. So if anybody is in the live chat over there from Algonquin, great to see you guys, and it won't be the last time for sure. Also, a huge shout out to our good friends over at Kid Products, makers of the Kid Reflector Oven and Twig Stoves. They also have a couple of new items on their website that you can go on there and check out, being a titanium pot, as well as I believe they have another new product coming down the pipe, but I'm not going to mention that quite yet because basically I want to make sure they got it launched. Last time I opened this mouth and said that they had a product, they didn't quite have it on the website yet. That was the titanium pot, but it's now there and available if anybody's looking for it for their camping kit. Next, we have our good friends over at Hunter and Harris Paddles, makers of handcrafted quality cherry wood canoe paddles. They're made right here, handmade by a fella by the name of Milan, and they're right here in Ontario. Great paddles by Annie Wright, and like I say it every week. I have 2 of them. Had a hard time dipping them in the water for the first time, but that's what they're made for, right? And they're truly fantastic paddles to push yourself around a lake. And I also mentioned last week that we had new sponsors to the show. Good old Nova Craft Canoes. They have been floating my behind around lakes for about the past 25 years. I'm truly a fan of their canoes. I still have one to this day. And they've been paddling the true north since 1970. So if you're ever in the market for a great canoe, check out Nova Craft Canoes. They have some really, really nice vessels that they produce and some high-tech materials. So by all means, be sure to check them out. And of course, we have our good friends over at Whitewater Coffee Crew who keep Dennis in coffee each week here at the show. And cheers to you guys. And it's hot. My wife actually just brought that down. Thank you, dear. I love you much. So any of my sponsors, if you ever want to check them out, please be sure to just check in the description below, and you will definitely see links to all of their websites, and go check them out. Do a little bit of shopping. Help support them because they help support us, right? That's a good thing. Last week, if you happen to miss the show, we had a couple on by the name of Ben and Cheryl Coles, and they have a YouTube channel called Camping with the Coles, and what their channel is basically about is they're RV campers, and they travel all around Ontario, and they do reviews on provincial parks, and they do a really great job of it, and I enjoy it. I'm more of a backcountry camper, but I see the value in what they do, and they shared with us a ton of tips on how to actually book provincial park campgrounds, okay, or campsites. A lot of it has to relates also to the way you would have to do it for what we like to do, the backcountry camping. So if you missed that episode, you can find the episode in our past season playlist, and that is right in the description below. You'll see little lightning bolts down around here. Go and you can check that out, and you can check out last week's show as well as many other great episodes that we've had in the past. Last, I think, Thursday, before I went up north and did some winter camping, I posted live the third part of my video from the West Spanish canoe trip called The Bog Monster. That's the thumbnail you would be looking for. If you haven't already checked it out, please give it a watch. It's about 40 minutes, I believe, somewhere around there, of some really hard-assed portaging through a pretty big bog. It was a lot of work, a lot of fun, and you're going to get a few good laughs throughout this one. So I hope you get the opportunity to check it out. But you know what? You can't watch that one unless you watch the first 2. By all means, you can find them in the playlist as well to get yourself all caught up on that. Quick shout out to all my channel supporters. Without your support, this probably wouldn't happen, this stuff, because there's a lot of costs incurred with putting on the show. So anybody who ever shoots super chats, buy me a coffees, or our channel members, thank you very much for your support. It really helps. You know what? Like I say, otherwise it all comes out of my pocket, and I try to give back to everybody. The more I get, the more I give. So it's one of those things that if you're interested in becoming a channel member, there's a join button down there. Just click on that. There's 3 different levels you can come in at, and just think about it. For 13 cents a day, you can help support the channel and be a Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show member. You'll get stickers and all kinds of perks and benefits that come along with it. So please, by all means, do check that out. Let's see here, a couple more things. Be sure to tune in next week. We have Pete Beck from the YouTube channel River Kings. River Kings are a group of Southern kayakers who are into whitewater and backcountry kayak camping. Be sure to tune in on the 25th. That's going to be a good show. You're going to get to learn a lot of canoeing or kayaking tips, which I'm sure could relate to any outdoor activities in many cases. But you know what? It's going to be a fun show dealing with kayaking, and a channel that's actually growing pretty big based on what they actually do. So by all means, please do tune into that if you have a free Tuesday evening next week. And for more information on what's happening with the channel, by all means, please check us out on Facebook at CanoeHounds Outdoor Adventure Show. I post on there ahead of time exactly what's going on, links and stuff like that to the live stream. So it just makes everything flow a little bit better, and you'll know what's going on. And you can also follow CanoeHound Adventures for everything that's happening with just CanoeHound Adventures, right? So that's all good too. If you have any hot topics or guests you would like to see on the show, please do drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com. This is the best way to contact me for anything, whether you're looking to have a guest on the show, if you become a new channel member and I need your contact information, drop me a note at canoehound@gmail.com. If you have any comments about the show, anything like that, please do. Just drop me an email. I answer everyone that I get, and it might take me a day or two, but I try to get to everybody's comments and questions. So please do drop me a note. I like that. Drop me a note. And then lastly, before we get on with tonight's guest, if you have any questions over there in the chat, please put the word question before your question. It just makes it a lot easier for this guy right here to identify the question. I'll put a mark beside it. In our streaming software, I now have the ability to mark questions that I can bring up at maybe a later point in the show. So if you've asked a question, I'm going to try and highlight them all, and I'll try to get to them. But if I don't get to them before the swag giveaway, you're going to have the opportunity to come up here, join myself and my guest, and ask a question. Don't be shy. It's very simple. People who have always said that, they're shy to do it, they come on, they go, it wasn't so bad, right? So by all means, come on up, ask a question, and have some fun. Well, without further ado, let's get into tonight's guests and learn a little bit more about a paddling icon. Tonight, we're joined by a backcountry paddler and perhaps the best-known canoe coach from the UK, who's paddled many Canadian rivers and lakes. His groundbreaking British canoe journey includes the first circumnavigation of Wales, 400 miles of coastal paddling, including open crossings and tide races, and the first unsupported canoe crossing of the Irish Sea, as well as the grueling journey across Scotland. Please welcome to the live stream tonight, the legend, Ray Goodwin. How you doing, sir?
Well, I'm a bit concerned that the legend. Does that mean I'm dead now?
No. You know what? You'd have to watch one of my past episodes when I had Jason Irwin on, and he was considered the new legend, right?
Right. Okay.
But
yeah.
no, you don't have to be. You could be here to still be a legend.
Okay, that's great. An article once in a Welsh magazine described me as a national treasure, and I can remember looking into dusty cabinets in museums, and they were national treasures. So, I'm unsure whether I'm meant to be dead or in a dusty cabinet. So, a bit concerned with these labels that people give.
Yeah. Well, all you don't want to hear is the late great, right?
No, I definitely don't.
So how you been doing, Ray? What's keeping you busy these days?
It's funny. I'm 69 now. I'll be 70 this year. And finally, it's caught up with me. The knees are shot. Heart's giving a few problems, which I've got a really good doctor. We have great fun. I quite bluntly the other day said to him, "What's the life expectancy then?" So that led to quite an amusing conversation. So that, and then a couple of things through the winter. So this last couple of months, November, December, were really unproductive. Which is unusual for me, a bit of downtime. But I finally got my finger out, just written an article for one of the paddling magazines down here, one that I've wanted to write for some time. I just seen 69 is a good number. It's a good number for a number of reasons. Yeah. It's not when the body's falling apart, I can assure you. And I've just got an article done. Been having a bit of a block on the videos, but I got a video done today that'll go out tomorrow. One that I want to do, I'm quite pleased with, technical one. And I've got other projects on the way in terms of that. I'm looking. Well, I'm slowing my business down. I'm going to keep working as a coach, but I'm slowing it down because I want more time for me, more creative time, more time with my daughter and my partner. But I want to get back out to Canada this summer, see how I cope with things, portages and the like, or whether I'm going to start having to do trips with relatively easy portages. See how the old heart stands up to it. I rattle now, so it'd be great with bears and things because they hear me coming.
Yeah, you have to explain the rattling because I caught that when you mentioned it in the green room. Why you rattle?
It's the number of bloody tablets I take in the morning.
I'm starting to rattle myself.
And all down the years, I've worked. This will be my 50th year of doing work in the outdoors, one way or the other. I mean, the first 2 years I was still at college and I was working through the summer. But that will now be 50 years of doing this. And people kept telling me you struggle in your 30s, in your 40s you won't be able to do it. In my 40s, they told me the 50s would be like. And by the time I hit my 60s, people gave up telling me. And it's part of the reason for my reputation because I've worked at a high level for a very long time.
Yeah.
But finally, my body has said, you can't push it too much. And it's quite funny. One of the local places I work, I was there the other day doing some videoing because it's very convenient. Landed, and a couple of the lads came down and picked my boat up and carried it up to the car and put it on the roof for me. I'm thinking, can you come to Canada and do that for me, please?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm looking in the live chat right now, and you've got here we go. Someone's willing to be your Sherpa. There you go.
That's good. I like it. I'm taking names.
Yeah. Heck, I'd even carry your canoe to get out and paddle with you sometimes. So.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a luck of the draw. The knees are absolutely shot from all the stuff I did in the mountains. Really heavy packs, a lot of stuff in winter in Scotland, big distances, fast travel, fast downhill with heavy loads. We didn't use ski sticks back in those days when we were doing stuff. Even now in the cinema, walking back down from the seats, back down to the flat floor at the front, I need a walking stick. The knees just don't take it. But I've got to lose some weight. Let's see if I can get some fitness back and see where we go. Because, we're only here for one run at it. And there's plenty of stuff, head up to the Yukon, other rivers where I don't need to portage because there isn't any problem on the water. I just want to be interested what it's going to be like doing a portage. And already, a mate said, I'll show you because I've always up until now been fine. So there you go. So before you get anywhere, you've got any health problems.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the knees are the problem, and that stems back to before your canoeing days, even, right?
Yeah,
because you had another passion back at that time.
Oh, massively! I was fanatical climber. I wasn't ever top notch. I was that a good rank below that. But I've climbed in Norway. I've rock climbed in the States. Done a lot of ice climbing. I've done ice climbs out on the equator on Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro. Both of those ice routes are gone now. One of them was truly one of the great ice routes of this world. So you're climbing at times 80 degree ice with bivy gear, high bivouacs on mountains, and that was an absolute passion. But I was never, one of the things with paddling, I think I've always been lucky with either conditions or people. And I don't feel I didn't manufacture that same luck as a mountaineer. So, for instance, the article I've just written is about, are you taking an opportunity? Are you creating an opportunity? Are you waiting for the right time? How long do you need to wait for these things? And I was very silly. I trained very hard for 6-7 months to climb a thing called the Troll Wall, the Trollvegen in Norway. Now, that's the highest vertical wall in Europe. We were expecting to be on it 3 days, possibly 4. Wow. They base jump from the top of it. It's overhanging. In fact, part of it's got fallen down now. But we were both working. Money was always an issue. And I was, unlike some mountaineers who would give up everything and just go and live in Chamonix in the Alps, feed themselves by stealing from the supermarkets. And, that was a thing. I wasn't prepared to do that. I never had that within me. Should have done. because something like the Troll Wall, you want to go and sit at the bottom of it for 2 months or in the area and then wait for your opportunity. But we only had 3 weeks, and it rained. And we thought some good weather was coming, so we had a forlorn attempt at it. But when the clouds cleared, the route was a series of interlinked waterfalls, and it's just not, it's just stupidity. It's not tenable. And so, if we'd got the right luck, we'd go up it, or we should have created the luck by being there for 2 to 3 months. And it's like later on, after you mentioned the Irish Sea crossing. Now, the Irish Sea in canoe has only been crossed twice. So that puts that in perspective in a nation of paddlers.
Right.
In canoe, it's crossed most years in sea kayak, and I've crossed it in sea kayak as well. But, 25 years ago, we were looking at crossing from Scotland to Norway. And that's, and Mad River, the importer of Mad River Canoes, supported me in those days. And I knew Kay Henry, that ran the company. And Kay was saying, well, what would it take for you to have a go at the North Sea crossing? And I said, well, there's 2 of us. We basically need our wages for 2 months. So we can sit and wait for the opportunity, create the opportunity to actually get the weather window to do it, and then probably be on the water in the boat for 3 to 4 days. And you'd be totally out of contact. There was no tracking devices back then. So, you were on your own, same as the Irish Sea. It's a different ball game now. But she wasn't prepared to stump up the money. I can't quite understand that. But she was quite surprised because I said, we won't even guarantee doing it. If we don't get the weather window, we don't do it. So there was almost a sense of relief that didn't happen. So in the mountains, I did some really good stuff, did some really good rock climbing. It also gave me a mentality as well, because some of the days out I've had in canoe have been 22 hours, 16 hours. And a lot of canoe people regard that as outrageous. Now, you're going to know people that would not regard it as outrageous. But most canoe paddlers are doing a relatively gentle day. But as a mountaineer operating in the Scottish hills in winter or on a big peak or bagging peaks in Scotland, 12-hour day is quite normal. 16-hour day is a really big one. And 18, 20 hours is unusual. But, so, I'm bringing that sort of background to the canoe. In the British Isles, there's that sort of harder mental side, or not even, it doesn't even have to be a harder mental side. You come in from a culture that was a part of, into a culture where that isn't as usual. So you can stand out without realizing you're going to stand out. So there you go. So the mountaineering played a big bit. And then when I was 30, I failed to get a job with the British Antarctic Survey. So I went back to working in an outdoor centre, and most of the people were climbers, but they were also kayakers. So they just dragged me out kayaking. And they weren't gentle. They were throwing me down stuff. So I was very quickly paddling on grade 3 and 4 water, and they were always taking a sweepstake on us when I was going to swim. And then one other thing, then one other thing happened at that period. Whenever we took kids kayaking, and it was generally on flat water or grade 1 water, when we got back to the centre, we'd stick on a video of the first British kayak descent of the Grand Canyon of the Colorado. So I must have watched that film 40, 50 times with kids in the room. And eventually I was thinking, as I paddled harder and harder in kayak, I was thinking, I could do that rapid. I could do that rapid. Yeah, that's possible. And then the best thing was I heard about 2 Americans who'd swum the length of the Grand Canyon. And one of them had walked around one of the biggest rapids, Lava, or the biggest rapid, Lava. The other guy swam it. The guy who walked around it went back a year later and swam Lava as well. But they swam with all their kit in duffels, ex-military rubber duffels, so they could keep it. But they swam the length of the Grand Canyon. I thought, well, if they can swim the rapids, I can kayak it. Because if I swim, I'm fine. But I didn't swim. I've done the Grand Canyon a couple of times now in kayak. And it was about that period I started to go into a canoe as well. But I was also sea kayaking and, doing pretty good things in sea kayak. So that all gave a background when in my late 30s, people introduced me to the canoe. And we were quite happy to throw stuff around in anything we were prepared to take a canoe on, grade 3 plus, big volume. It didn't bother us. It would bother me now. It didn't bother us because we were paddling class 5 white water. We were paddling waterfalls. The thought of swimming on a grade 3 or an easy grade 4 was, yeah, that's fine. We'll just swim it if we need to. As long as we don't break the boat, we'll fill it with airbags. Yeah. So we came in rather as a throwing the boats around thing to start with. Yeah.
Well, you know what? You should watch next week's show with the River Kings. Bring back some of those old kayaking memories. So you've always been an adventurer then throughout your entire life, pretty much.
Yes, yeah. And two aspects. I like the technical.
Mm-hmm.
As a climber, I'm quite happy to go to a small cliff and climb. I like throwing. I used to like throwing a kayak about on the river. I love surfing. I can describe waves to this day that I surfed on the Ocoee. I paddled on the Ocoee in that area in kayak. A wave called Moonshot, and I can still remember that wave. I can remember a particular wave, 2 waves on the Grand Canyon. One that I surfed that was just fabulous, and one that I didn't surf and I bottled it. And I can still remember the feeling. 3 strokes and I'm on this wave, biggest light wave of my life as a surfer. And I went, no, I don't want to. I went back over the shoulder and on down the river.
Now that would have been in a canoe or in a kayak?
Kayak.
Okay.
And this is an oddity because a lot of people went over to OC1s. Kent Ford's video was very influential. But the key was, so I'd started throwing a canoe around, and I was doing some longer journeys with it. And there were a couple of major influences. One was a Scottish guy, but before that, somebody gave me Bill Mason's book, Path of the Paddle. And I loved it to bits. And I got Song of the Paddle. Initially, I was disappointed with Song of the Paddle because I wanted more Path of the Paddle. I didn't see the films, so they weren't easily accessible to me. We didn't have the facility to see them back then. But that thing that he'd done, he'd made this huge leap forward in writing books because, sometimes people sometimes call me the British Bill Mason, and that's wrong. That's totally wrong. I've done a book. It's a very well received book. I think there's things in there that are technically better than Path of the Paddle, but it doesn't matter because what Bill did was he made that leap from a single picture or a sketch and loads of words to strips of photographs to describe a technique. And talking to Becky, she said, the later editions of the book, he was really annoyed because the black and white strips of photographs were very poor quality, and there's a reason behind that. And he was livid that it had happened, apparently. I never met the guy I would have loved to. But he made that leap in his mind between doing the one thing that everybody else had done, and he suddenly, because he's the cartoonist, he's a filmmaker, so to see movement as strips of photographs, and as far as I'm aware, it's the first book that did that, and I just lapped it up, and I wanted to do everything in there. But the other thing is, at that period, I could not afford to go to Canada. So that's another formative thing. So what I was trying to do was, I knew Scotland extremely well. I had done so much time in the hills there and remote hills. So can we recreate some of Bill Mason or the Canadian experience with portage and linking up bits of water? Some of it's quite outrageous that happened. And mates of mine were telling me I was being stupid. I met a guy called Stuart Bell who'd already done some incredible things, but nobody really quite knew what he'd done. And, he'd written an article, but it wasn't inspirational. The photographs were poor. The writing didn't grab me. So it hadn't affected me. But when I met the man, briefly for an hour and a half, we just chatted and he was telling us what he'd done, where he'd been. And I went, those are bigger than my ideas. somebody out there is doing it, and so it all became possible, and went on to do far bigger than Stewart in Scotland. And we're linking up watersheds, and one of the trips crosses 3 watersheds over 270 miles. Total height gain on the watersheds is 2,000 feet, so 600 meters or so between the 3 watersheds. And most of that is carrying the boat or trolleying the boat up a hill to get to the point you can go down the other side. And it's now sort of caught on in Scotland. Lots of people doing this. So we have this sort of image of portage and how you link things in Canada. And so Bill was the massive influence on me with that stuff. And when I came to do a book myself, I'm thinking, have I got something new to say? And in the end, I decided I had. But, it's very much based on what people like, what Bill Mason did. So that's why I always sort of bridle at the comparison. It's very nice, good bit of publicity. It's nice to hear the British Bill Mason, but it's not what he did. And, you think of his filmmaking, his painting and everything like that. Incredible man, incredible. So there you go.
There you go, yeah.
Inauguration.
So you had the background in your expeditions and climbing or mountaineering. You also the kayaking. Where did that transition come in, where you all of a sudden took on a passion for canoeing and then wanted to take it one step further to be able to share the technical aspect and teach people?
Well, the teaching and technical aspect, that's easy. I've always been a coach instructor, and I've loved that. Right from day one that I was in the outdoors. I was very lucky. Nowadays, most young instructors are employed doing multi-activities. So you do 3 activities in a day. That wasn't thought about back in 1972. And the Youth Hostel Association back then had inherited courses from a mountain craft group. And so we had a group of people for 6 days at a time to teach them how to go up mountains, hill walking and scrambling. And so right from that, and I was with good people who were leading those courses. I was only ever an assistant those 2 summers, though I did independently lead part of those groups at different routes. So right from the word go, I was teaching. And at that time, I was at Teacher Training College. I got a distinction for teaching, which was just as well because everything else was right on the line because I wasn't terribly academic or interested. And so I scraped through that with that one distinction. But I didn't teach in a school for 3 years afterwards when a private school actually wanted outdoor activities run. And they knew of me working in a centre that kids had been to and said, would you be interested in a job? And from that phone call, I had an interview the next day. The headmaster got me pissed, offered me the job, and I thought, I've got to take this job. So I had 4 years working in a school, which was really good because you were developing youngsters. We were doing rock climbing. We did a little bit of kayaking, but, looking back on it, it's pretty horrendous what we were doing because we didn't have an idea. But back in those days, we weren't that interested in qualifications. If you're a sound mountaineer, you'll be all right on an easy river, which isn't quite true, but that's what was happening back then. Sure. And then, so it's the sea kayaking, the river kayaking, the mountaineering. The mountaineering really gave me a venue with Scotland because I knew it so well. I could start thinking, well, we could link up this bit of blue with this loch, with this bit of blue, and maybe we can find a way to do that. So it was very easy to look at a map and sort of, I'd have a picture, not necessarily the ground at that point, but I knew where it was. I knew various spots where I'd been on the mountains there. And journeying has always been a major thing for me anyway. And I think, the sheer adventure of going up into Scotland, knowing you're the first person to drag a boat up this big pass and then down this stream. We got into streams, headwaters of streams that were really not quite as wide as the canoe. And, you've carried it up from a loch. You've managed to get up to about 600 feet above sea level, a couple hundred meters above sea level. and then you're actually going downhill. You're starting a river where it starts, and you're finishing in a full-blown river that goes into the sea, that's wide and fast flowing. Now that's a pretty unique experience. Sure. And it just grabbed me, and I was writing about it and taking photographs.
Now, were you taught, like, in order for you to be able to teach the skills and, you know, all the technical stuff, where did you learn that yourself? Did you mentioned that you kind of idolized Bill Mason, but where did you pick up all your canoe techniques and stuff like that? Was it
Well, I think
trial by fire?
I think there's two things. There's coaching, and coaching science, if you like. And I was always interested in how coaching and teaching worked. And back when I was really pushing forward with my technique in canoe and kayak, I was reading stuff on Zen Buddhism, in a game of tennis, in a game of skiing. In a game of skiing was sheer genius. And the guy had looked at how Zen Buddhism operated in teaching physical skill, and then he applied it into his inner game with his self one, self two. Now we know that model isn't actually true, but it provides a very good working model. So all these things fascinated me, and then gradually within British canoeing, and this is the thing about British canoeing, and this is where it is so different to Canada. So many people join clubs here and they start doing certification for skills or instruction or leadership. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's really sad, because the objective becomes the certification rather than the doing. And I sometimes warn Brits, you know, they've got this award, and I say, when you go to Canada, you're going to be quite disappointed. Right. You're going to look at the majority of Canadian paddlers and go, oh my God, they're crap. Because the great thing with Canada is, you know, the canoe is almost like hiring a bicycle on holiday.
Right.
Most Canadians believe they can get in a canoe and go. And maybe the wilderness ethos is beginning to diminish now, the length of trip is there. And the best technical Canadian paddlers will be every bit the same as the best technical British paddlers, and their understanding will probably be the same. But because of the club structure and this, people get overly fixated on qualifications, that they become technically quite good. And I'd say to them, when you go to Canada, you'll find that most people that you see, they'll be swapping sides, or they won't have a very good J stroke, or they won't do this, or they'll be ruddering. And I've seen people get quite upset. You know, these people, they look at these people and they go, they're in the wilderness, they should be better than this. I said, they don't need to be better than this. They need to know how to sort themselves out. They need to have a mentality for being there. And one of the things I try to get over to British folk, because I get quite a lot who just book me to say, look, we're going to go to Canada. We don't want a guide, but we need to learn. And a lot of it's about the judgment, how you're going to pack your boat, how you're going to make a judgment on things, organising a portage, you know, the sort of things that any experienced Canadian paddler, you know, is second nature to. But for somebody coming out of Britain going into that context, you know, that's the sort of stuff they need to learn. And the psychology of being in a wilderness. I see it, you know, once you get float planes, the classic. You know, if we got a float plane trip, people really look forward to that. And my missus, when she did her first trip in Canada with me on the Blood Vein, the big thing she fixed, we're going in by float plane, we're going in by float plane. And we got on the float plane, and the drone of the engine, she actually fell asleep on my shoulder. But one of the things, when the float plane pushes back, the engine restarts and it takes off, you know, and so often they come back for a fly through to say goodbye. I look at the group and you see this dawning awareness. We're now there. You've made this transit from a city to a village, and then suddenly you are committed in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, if you're doing 13, 14 days, a few days into the trip, unless you're very fit, you're going to ache because you're carrying big loads and you're doing this and you're paddling. And one of my jobs is to understand that the psychology is interesting for folk. That they are going to, that some of them are going to start struggling when they get those aches and pains, because they don't know that they're going to work through them. They don't know that that is normal. And the other thing that we get the trips we run, we get a lot of people who call themselves bushcrafters, and they're good with an axe and a saw and a knife and lighting fires and whatever. But generally, they walk into the woods in England, and they're walking a few hundred meters. And Paul's just brought out his book on campcraft, axecraft, a phenomenal book. And both Paul and Paul, I'm not anywhere near as skilled or as knowledgeable as Paul, but I've been around axes since I was a kid. I was an ice climber, so you had two bloody axes, one strapped to each wrist, and you're swinging those buggers on steep ice. So I'm very used to being around axes. I'm very used to being very tired and being around axes. And one of the things that with Brits that are inexperienced in wilderness, we don't want a lot of axes around. Axes are bad news.
Yeah.
Sort of we have a couple of axes with us because we will need maybe to split wood. Saws are better for most things. But I can remember those days when it's been pouring with rain all day. It's gradually worked its way through the waterproof, so people are wet or damp. They are tired. They are cold. And then we get out onto slippery rocks and move gear. And then we've got to get a fire going as quickly as we can, tarps up and fire going to get the psychology of the fire. I mean, it's burnt into our psyche as a species, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the whole thing of our development is because we developed fire 800,000 years ago or whatever. And for 800,000 years, our species has sat around fires. But the problem is, I'm used to swinging an axe or using an axe or a saw when I'm tired, and they're not. And you have to be under management, under control and stuff. So there are big differences between coming out of a British context and going into a wilderness context in Canada. When it's easy in Canada. And when it's cold and wet and people are tired, but I've had that in British mountains and whatever. But, what I call deep wilderness is different again. You don't want the accident. So there you go. There's a bit of a comparison.
Sure.
And the thing with the canoe is I felt I was coming home. So all these other skills, plus the stories of the voyagers, the stories, the history, because in mountaineering there's a history, an ethos. And the same with the canoe. There is a story. There is a history. And there are, we've got people like, Nate's just pointed out he's got Paul's book. It's good stuff.
Actually, he's got a good question for you too. I got it waiting here in the side. So
there you go. It all came together. I felt that all those skill sets and the canoe felt a natural home. And also there was a case of, for the first time, I was, in the UK setting, I was pulling off things that other people had not done. The Round Wells trip, 600 miles in total, but 400 of it on the sea. And it's, sea kayakers flying from North America to paddle on those waters because they're so adventurous. And we're doing it in a canoe. And that trip was not bettered. Nate's got a really good question there. I'll finish what I'm saying, then you can fire that back at me.
Sure.
And it was that, it was quite funny, the reaction to us on that Round Wells trip. Whenever we met kayakers, they presumed we were numpties, beginners, because we were in kayaks. And we were actually doing something far more highly skilled than anybody else we met on that trip. Got a tickle in the throat here. I don't think it's anything, but it's just tickling. I had to change to water because if I'm going to have a dram of whiskey, I couldn't have squash and drink a decent malt whiskey. It just, somebody quite rightly would have picked me up on it.
Gotta cleanse the palate.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Ram Wells trip wasn't actually surpassed as a seagoing trip in the UK until 3 years ago, and a guy called Colin Skeeth and his nephew took a canoe around the entirety of the British mainland. They did it, I think they were 93 days, which is about that's a fast time in sea kayak. It's been done in sea kayak quite a few times, but that's the first time that it was done in canoe, and it was outrageous. Far bigger than the trip we've done. Colin's a good friend of mine. They had some advantages. They could have a tracking. They were using a spot messenger to be tracked, which was fascinating. They had a support vehicle on the land, so they didn't have to carry that much. They did go independent for sections. But Katrina, Colin's wife, who's a superb paddler in her own right, she did support for them. But it was just one of the most outrageous things done in a canoe. Some of the crossings they did, some of the conditions they were in, some of the tide races, but it took 25 years to do something bigger than we did back then. And the same with the Irish Sea crossing. That we crossed it, a few years later somebody else crossed it in canoe. It's crossed regularly in sea kayak, but it's 2 crossings in 27 years. That's all. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
Out in the middle, you're 30 miles from land in any direction. That's a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day when we did it, all we had were parachute flares and smoke flares. There isn't that much shipping out there. If it had gone wrong, if we couldn't sort it ourselves, we were finished. Simple as. But the guy I was paddling with, Dave Howie, I like Dave, mountaineer as well as a paddler. He got within 1,000 foot of the top of Everest. And one of the things I like about Dave, he was on a new route and he knew he could get to the summit. There was enough left to get to the summit, but they knew bad weather was coming. So do you go? You put all that effort in, all that time, all that desire for years, and Dave turned back and he looked at me when he told me his story. He said, "Ray, I've got a wife and kids. I wasn't going to die on it." And a lot of people die on it, and that's the sort of person I like to do things with.
Common sense kind of guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, prepared to get stuck in. We'll stick our necks out, but we're not going to do something, that's beyond, if you like. I've been to the edge. I've probably been across the edge a few times. One of them in Canada, but we might get to that in due course.
Yeah. We've got. We want to talk about a couple of your Canadian trips that you've done, because I know you've been over here quite a few times. Did you want to cover that question quickly from Nate there? That was a pretty good question.
Fire the question up again.
Yeah. So he's asking: is the push to join a club to get certification based on the idea of safety skills before heading, or is it more based on British paddling culture and belonging to the club?
I think there's a combination of both. There are people that are totally independent. They just get on with it. I meet people. I'm changing the whole emphasis of my business because I'm slowing it down. And I get people who've never heard of British Canoeing as an organisation, never heard of clubs, because I very often push them to join certain clubs because they can get free instruction. They can go out with more experienced people. And as you know, and I know, when you're learning, there's so many things you don't know. It's the things you don't know that you don't know. The Donald Rumsfeld thing, the unknown unknowns, that's going to bite your ass and kill you.
Yeah.
And very often the worst paddling disasters, like you had the ones with the kids from the camp in Canada. We've had kids in kayak on the south coast, and we had 2 families on the west coast of Scotland. Multiple fatalities. And it was the unknown unknowns for either the families or the very inexperienced instructors that were running the children's thing. So, so there are people who don't like that club structure. They just get on with their own thing. They may take some instruction. And quite often they take a few days of instruction just to, my advice is get some instruction, join a club or whatever. So you get a boost. It speed everything up for you. And, going into the wilderness, you see people going into Algonquin and they have no experience. And you see massively experienced people out there, but you also see those people who are heading into the wilderness for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And they're not really paddlers. They're going to have to swap sides at the back to steer the thing. The kit is a bit all over the place. Their etiquette, I came across some people, they didn't even say hello. We're on a narrow creek in Algonquin. I forget, Otter Slide or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so there's somewhere around there. And it was relatively narrow, so you had to move over to let them by. And they weren't even acknowledging us because they were shy. They were more used to the city than the wilderness. And I know we're only on the edge of the wilderness. And they've also got music blaring on the top of their boat. And they didn't seem bad people, but they'd never been part of the ethos that people like you and I would be part of. Mm-hmm. So going out with people that know, I think is really good. But I think some people get into the habit of the club and things being organized for them. And they also, the objective becomes a certification rather than the trip. And, I've had people who are trying to gain a leadership award. And they said, well, how many rivers do I have to do before I can come to assessment? I'm saying, well, the book says you've got to have a minimum of this, but I would suggest you double that. Well, really, do I have to do that many? So the love is for the piece of paper. Sometimes it's because they're a young instructor working in a centre and they need the next step up. Mm-hmm. But it can be somebody who's just club-based. They've got a totally different ballgame. And the piece of paper becomes the objective rather than the trip. Yeah. But don't get that wrong. That's only a proportion. There are so many passionate paddlers in the UK because British paddlers go all over the world. I've got people I know who are down in Chile at the moment. I've got professional acquaintances who regularly work in Nepal, work in France, work on the Zambezi, work in Uganda on the Nile. So British paddlers are extremely adventurous because we're only a small island. So you've got to go somewhere else for the really big stuff. But it does concern me, and I'd see people with what I would call moderate level pieces of paper. And I said, well, I'm not sure I'm experienced enough to go to paddler. And I go back to Canada. Just get on with it. You don't need anything. Just do it. You need to learn about the wilderness. Your paddling's way beyond what you need. You've got the experience. Just get on with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to pop up another quick question here from the chat that was in way early, and then we're going to kind of bring things over to our side of the pond there a little bit there, because I know you've done a lot of tripping in Canada. Wilderman Northern Adventure, who's a channel member of Canoehound Adventures, asks if you've ever traveled the Tay in Scotland and where are the best places to canoe in the UK?
Yeah, I've done the Tay quite a number of times. It's a really nice river. You can sneak in for wild camps, but it's inhabited all along the way of it. You've got one of the biggest Roman forts in Britain on the banks of the Spey, from the Agricola attempt to conquer Scotland. So one of the things about paddling in Britain, so often there's so much historical stuff around. So, have a good look at your maps. Tay is good. If I call it of the easier trips, I love the Spey, which is the one we took Kevin Callan on when we did the whiskey tour. And you can do it in a number of days. With customers, you can do the headwaters; they can be quite dry. When we're doing it commercially, we normally run from a place called Loch Inch and take 3.5 days to go to the sea. And very often, in past years until COVID, Then I'd been out in Canada in the first weeks of September, come home for 2 weeks, if that, 10 days to 2 weeks, and then gone up to Scotland to run the Spey. And the Spey is never a disappointment, having been in Canada. It's just a great classic river. And I never tell people, often say, where'd you camp, Ray? And I said, not telling you. Because if I tell people, if I wrote a guide, that then spreads and everybody camps at the same spot and it's soon worn out. Yeah. And in Scotland, you are legally allowed to wild camp as long as it's not cultivated land. Now, a lot of the Spey is salmon fishing, very expensive. It's like having a lawn in places on the side of the river to make it easy for the fishermen to operate. But there's plenty of places. I say the islands are great, but even if they camp on one of the islands that I normally camp on, I bet they don't use the same landing place, so they camp at a different spot. So that's my little ecological thing. Well, one, I don't want my spot ruined, but because we only use it 2 or 3 times in a year, or twice commercially and once maybe if I pop up myself. But it just spreads people out. And if you haven't got the gumption to go and find it yourself, don't do the trip. Or, look at the guidebook. The guidebook will tell you where there are official campsites. I love the River Spey. You can spend 4 days. But one of the things I've got into in recent years, and the Great Glen, crossing from Fort William to Inverness. There's a huge fault line there, which is filled with, it's got Loch Ness in. Loch Ness is, 23 miles long. So even in Canadian terms, it's not that big. However, it runs southwest, northeast. If a wind really gets up and it funnels and speeds up along the Great Glen, Loch Ness can be a monster. There are days I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. And again, in context, it's the only inland water in the UK that has a lifeboat on it. Because it has a lot of passing sailing boats, shipping, whatever, because it's a shortcut across Scotland. Now it's mainly leisure, but the fishing boats still use it. If you're waiting to go into a loch with a sailing boat and a fishing boat turns up, don't get in its way. It will take no prisoners. They feel they have a right to jump the queue. That's great. And so those are all sort of, but one of the things coming from Canada is realizing that that's not truly wilderness. I can find a wild campsite on the Spey, but I'll hear a farm a kilometre away with its, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'll hear its machinery beginning to work, or I'll hear a yard, a kilometre in that direction. And your brain filters that stuff out. There is fantastic camping on the Spey. And if you're close to the river, you've got the noise of the river. But you're not truly wilderness. But, it's classic, really good paddling. The really wild stuff is up in the mountains. And there's no real guidebook to any of that. And that's the stuff that I cut my teeth on, the harder stuff. But one of the things in recent years, or up until recently, a mate and I had this concept of, the Spey from, he turned to me one day and said, do you think we could paddle the Spey in a day? And I went, where from? And he said, well, Loch Inch. So that misses the headwaters. So you're already into pretty guaranteed water. You're dependent on water level. But me being me, I couldn't resist it. I thought, right, he's a hard bugger. So I just looked at him and said, what are we going to do the other day then? And he flinched. I got him. So the paddling the Spey in a day is a big thing, but I couldn't resist. There's saying the devil's sitting on my shoulder, and he just said, go on, say it, Ray, say it, Ray. I said, what are we going to do the other day? And he said, what? And I said, we could do the Great Glen. So we did these 2 classic multi-day trips in 2 days, back to back. Now, you've got to have a big element of luck to get the right weather conditions to do that. But the reality of it was, most people count it as inexperienced people paddling it who do a late start, a few hours, and they have lunch and they pootle a bit and they do this. They're not really paddling that hard. And they take 5 days to do it. But it took us 16 and a half hours to paddle the Great Glen. it was hard graft because we had wind briefly for 2 hours, but not that strong. So we could do a bit of sailing, but it wasn't that good. And we had a driver who picked us up, dropped us at the top of the Spey, and put it in perspective. And this is coming from these mountaineering things. You know, I've done a ridge on the Isle of Skye. I was probably on it for 18 hours. You know, it's one of the big days out as a mountaineer, hill walker, hill person in Scotland. A lot of scrambling, abseils, the lot. It's a monster day. Well, the Spey was only 11 and a half hours to run what we normally do in 3.5 days. But the thing is, we were paddling constantly. We weren't paddling hard. We were making sure we weren't hitting eddies. We weren't taking on water. And yet, you talk to a lot of canoe people, oh, that's a big day out. And I'm thinking, it's not that big. So, yes, Spey, the Tay's really nice. a lot more stuff on the side. The Spey tends to be easy or hard, but there's some great paddling on it. Really good paddling on it. You can wild camp if there are only a couple of you can find spots. Spey is brilliant. You can hire boats for the Spey. We have outfitters in Scotland. They're not generally the quality of what you get in Canada. You get decent boats. But, you know, seeing something like Goodwin Outfitters and walking in and all your food's laid out and your kit's laid out on the table and everything, you're not going to see that normally.
Oh, cool. You know what, Ray? We're at about almost 8 o'clock. I'm gonna get our swag giveaway in right now.
Can I just point out?
We're gonna bring you over our side of the pond for a little while. How's that?
Yeah.
Hey, I see a little color in that glass. I like that.
Yeah, that's a Glenlivet.
Yep.
It's the 12-year-old. I didn't think it was. I've got an 18-year-old that it's already lasted a year because I just take a very small top when my palate is clean, but it's not for sitting here just supping.
Yeah.
But that's it's on a river called the Arn, which is spelt Avon, but it's pronounced Arn. The Scots like to do that. And it's a tributary of the Spey. So I would count this as a Spey side or Spey malt. Yeah. So anyway,
cool.
Your side of the pond.
Gonna do the swag giveaway first, and then we'll get on with that, and we'll invite some guests up as well. If everybody that's on the show tonight there has been noticing the last couple of weeks, I've kind of changed up the way I've been doing the swag giveaway, and we're kind of doing it as an instant giveaway for the time being. Basically, I do something like this: I add to the stream a word like Ray Goodwin, and then I ask you to please type that into the chat just as you see it, with the capital letters and everything. And in about 30 seconds, I'm going to get Ray to do a countdown from 10. And then basically we are going to, we're going to select the winner. Okay. So I'll give you all a moment here. Just going to give everybody a moment here to get some population here. Type in the name Ray Goodwin into the chat, and we'll select our winner. Yes. So, and while we're doing this as well, I'm going to right now just post the invite. Let's see here. Just give me a second. Join us for a quick question. And there we go. When you see that, if anybody would like to join us on panel for a quick question, feel free to do so. And there it is. All righty. Okay, everybody, we're going to give you about another 10 seconds to get the name Ray Goodwin typed into the chat, and then we are going to do our prize giveaway. Oh, there. You've got this much time. I have another obligation here. Let's see. Rate. I'm getting off kilter here. Alrighty, as usual, our swag giveaway is brought to you by our friends over at Algonquin Outfitters, and up for grabs tonight there. We're going to be giving a Canoe Hound Adventures prize package as well as a few certificate goodies from Algonquin Outfitters for you to use if you're ever in the area. And Ray, how about a countdown from 10? And we're going to pick tonight's winner.
Okay, seeing I taught maths for a period, I might be able to manage this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Lift off 0.
Let's see who tonight's winner is. Nina V. Nina V is our winner tonight. Nina, what I need you to do is please drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com with your full name and mailing address, and I will get your prize out in the mail as soon as I have that information. Congratulations, Nina, and let's move on with the show. We do have a couple people in the basement. I'm just going to be, I see both of you down there, Kevin and Steven. I'll be with you in a moment, so please don't go anywhere. And we are going to, okay, so Ray, You've been over this side of the pond quite a few times, and you obviously must have a love for Canadian, either the landscape or what our millions and millions and millions of lakes have to do for you. What's the allure for you coming over to Canada?
Well, first time I was in North America to canoe as opposed to kayak or climb. Actually, I went south. I do apologize. I went and paddled the Rio Grande because it was fitted in the time off. I could take a lot of time off over Christmas, New Year, but it was difficult to get time off in the summer to do anything decent. But then going to Canada, well, the first time, Bill Mason, the Voyageurs, the history. You know, it was just like, this is what had driven me to do what I did in the UK. I had to go to Canada. And it was a shock because I took advice, and the first trip I took, well, don't go to Algonquin because, you know, and I have been to Algonquin since with my daughter, thoroughly enjoyed it, loved it. So don't anybody get insulted. But I was told, go to Tomogamy, because I thought first time I'm going to go and do a flat water trip. But there were a number of issues, I think. And the first thing was there were only two of us. We're not used to having something bigger than us around in the environment, so bears. So I know the likelihood of having an issue with bears if you behave yourself is extremely low. Mm-hmm. But psychologically, you know, other than stuff I've done in Africa, I've not been in environments where there is something bigger than you around. So trying to mentally do that. And I remember the first time we bloody camped, and we camped on a small island. Yeah, bears can swim, so that's not going to do a lot. We put a rope up a tree and pulled our food bag up the tree, which was hilarious when we took it down the next day because the rope wrapped itself around the branch and wouldn't come down. So I ended up climbing the tree myself, which the bear could have done. But the other thing that was a real thing for me was the landscape, because was used to doing things where the landscape was in itself dramatic. And it was interesting when you showed the Algonquin bits and pieces video just now, and you had the aerial of all the lakes stretching away. I think that nowadays I find that inspirational. Mm-hmm. But you're down in the trees. You don't, you know, you have a hill that's covered in trees. You know, I'd like to go to Killarney because, you know, it looks much more spectacular in the landscape. But I've been used to Rio Grande, Grand Canyon, the Alps, Nepal, Scotland, you know, a landscape that in itself is dramatic. And one of the big adjustments for me mentally, so one was the relaxing into that environment, but the other one was I had to grow to appreciate the landscape of Canada in Ontario and Manitoba. So basically you've got a flat tree-covered landscape. So the things that are beautiful are small. You've got beautiful little cliffs, you've got waterfalls, but it isn't mountains that tower 1,000 meters above you that you're canoeing through. My second trip was to the Blood Vein, and that worked much better for me in some ways, though I made a colossal error, which I've dealt with it a number of times over the years. It's in the book. It's also one of the things I put into the article I've just written, because I've got some qualms about certain things that people do in the modern world. They plan things that we will do it on this date. And the outdoor world doesn't work like that. You know, you need the right conditions to do things. But gradually over the number of trips, I think I've done the Blood Vein over the years. I think I've done it 4 times because it works brilliantly with customers. Floatplane in, you've got pictographs, you've got wonderful lakes, you've got some really good rapids you can run, lots of judgment, fabulous campsites, spectacular campsites in reality. But it was, for me, getting used to that environment in itself. Now, I've paddled up, I did a trip last year, or back a couple of years ago, on the Big Salmon, down into the Yukon and then down to Dawson, which is spectacular. You know, particularly the Big Salmon, you've got mountains all around you. So it's much more of an environment that I'm used to. But I'm now totally used to that. I say totally, I am very used to that environment. I've never done a tundra river in Canada. And part of the reason is, you know, even to this, until recently, how much time I could take off. So put it in a Canadian context, I think in Canada, I would be quite an ordinary tripper of experience, because the longest trips I normally do are 12, 14 days. And, you know, on the Bonnet Plume, we were on it for 18 days, as opposed to going up into the tundra rivers where you might spend 6 weeks up there. Now, I've never felt I had the spare cash to be able to do that. And now, because my daughter and health issues, I don't think I will do that. You know, if I was going to do that, I would have needed to do it. And I was talking to Cliff Jacobson about it and chatted through the rivers I've done. And I said, what do I need to do? What makes the bag complete? He said, you need a tundra river. He said, because you've done this type of river, you've done this type of river, you've done this sort of flat trip. You know, I've paddled in the Boundary Waters with Winona. So I've had a reasonable sprinkling, but in terms of people like, I would imagine yourself and a lot of people you know, it's a moderate Canadian experience. You know, there's nothing that I've done in Canada that stands out. It's been good stuff, as opposed to the Irish Sea crossings and the Welsh trip and some of the Scottish stuff, which were groundbreaking. So I feel myself to be quite an ordinary paddler of experience in Canada. Does that make a sense?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I just love it to bits. I love being out there in the wilderness. I love being there for myself, and I love working as a guide there. But again, you know, that's probably coming towards its end.
Sure. You know, hearing that makes me feel a lot more fortunate for what we actually have, because we are truly God blessed with what we have as far as opportunities for this water sport that we love so much. Right? It's a great opportunity, and it's all there at our fingertips, pretty much. We got a couple of people in the basement here. I want to start by bringing one up here to ask a quick question of you. Please welcome to the live stream, Stephen Coots, a past guest of the show, I believe, back in season 1, also known as the Canoe Polar. How are you doing, Stephen? Long time no see.
Yeah, grand. This is lovely to see you, Dennis. Of course, go away, Dennis. This is such a thrill for me, Ray.
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan. I love your book. Have your book. I collect books.
Thank you.
I come from a canoeing instruction background from as early as 1979 as a style paddling instructor and summer camp tripper and such. And I grew up with my dad, who was a Boy Scout leader and took trips in Algonquin Park in the 1930s and 40s. So it's like I'm kind of old school, even though I'm not old enough to be old school. But by my moniker here, I've kind of moved away from other facets of canoeing instruction. I'm focusing on poling because it is all but disappeared, except for New Brunswick on the East Coast. It is all but disappeared in our country. Matter of fact, it's to the point where canoeists go, "You got to be crazy! You can't do that, right?"
Yeah.
And could you just, and of course you already hit your, and this is supposed to be a quick question. Now I'm babbling, sorry. But you ran through, you hit the point that I was going to ask, which was British canoeists are more likely to take training, whereas Canadian canoeists grew up, it's ubiquitous, it's a symbol. Everybody had one or went to a summer camp or did it at school. And so everybody kind of thinks they know what they're doing, and it is a danger. It doesn't, not for everyone, of course, you'd have gentle trips. So we have a tendency here not to take training. It's a very small percent. I'm always amazed when I meet somebody that has. So here's my question. Or if you would just quickly run through the process that what's now, I always think of the British Canoe Union, but British Canoeing does when you start somebody canoeing, and then what you introduce them to in the mainstream, because we never sail. People throw up a tarp, but nobody trains for it. And certainly we do in Paddle Canada have training program for poling, but only for the last 5 years. Other than that, it disappeared in the early 80s.
Okay, so there are a number of things here within the club structure, and there's been a lot of changes with what's being taught. Because you can get personal performance awards, so gain those ticks along the way, and then you can decide if you want to become a coach or a leader. But at a certain point, if you want to work on what we call moderate water, lead on moderate water, and be qualified, and that may be as a club person who has a perfectly ordinary job, as opposed to a professional like myself. But I've come up through the same set of qualifications, and the professionals bloody go, well, it's all designed for amateurs, and we're being forced to jump through hoops, and the amateurs go, well, this is a professional standard, and the reality is it was designed for purpose for clubs. And so the influence of Bill Mason is massive. The original technical points and structure was based on Bill Mason's books. That's the first thing. And most British coaches won't even realise that now, but that still washes down to this current day. So somebody the other day asked me, why do you paddle tandem? They were looking at my J-stroke video and say, why do you paddle tandem boat, Ray? Because I'm looking at buying a boat, and this is a solo boat. And Cliff Jacobson will have a go at us because he will paddle through solo boat. But it's this Bill Mason concept that you can paddle it, you can sail it, you can portage it, you can do. We fell in love with the romance of the canoe, I think. Now, I think a lot of people controlling the syllabus now no longer understand that legacy. So there were various stages. So, right through, I would say there are a lot more British paddlers who paddle at a very high level in hard conditions. I was out on lakes, and it will be the Advanced Leadership Award. I have to assess it in force 5 winds. Yeah, so I'm expected to be out. Yeah, now that might be a lake that's only 3 or 4 miles long, but it kicks off in that distance.
Yeah.
Now in Canada, in the wilderness, who's going to go out in a force 5 wind on a big lake? Yeah, unless you're hugging the shore and trying to find shelter. So we have this. This really high technical level that's pushed at the advanced level, but there are stages to that, and you can either do that as a personal performance, that you are competent to operate in that environment, or you've got that competency yourself, but you've also got the experience and the training and the assessment to become a leader in that environment. But then if you want to coach in that environment, that's a separate string. So I find it over complex now, personally.
It's a lot.
But the young instructors, and that means people, the really top-notch people, will be probably in their 30s. They've been, hotshot kayakers and whatever, 20s, 30, they become multidiscipline. And, they can operate in those conditions. And they've gone and got that package at the highest level. I did that package. It was more consolidated when I did it. But I did it in sea kayak, whitewater kayak, and canoe. So again, it brings all. So I don't see breaking out in a sea kayak different to breaking out in a canoe. To me, they're the same mechanism.
Yep.
So yeah, it's all those things. And so poling is in the syllabus, and a lot of people bridled at that. But again, it's why we paddle wide boats. Now, whether that's right or wrong, or Cliff's right, and really bloody get out, get a life, guys, and get a solo boat.
No.
But poling's a big thing. I don't pole as hard as I used to because
I know you've got a huge section in your book on polling.
Yeah, I don't like to take the knocks nowadays. It hurts more and it takes longer to recover, and I don't like it. Yeah, but we've had Harry Rock. Harry Rock's a friend of mine. We've had Harry Rock over to the UK on 2 or 3 occasions, and he's been a massive influence with his modern style of polling.
Yeah.
Fabulous coach. Love him to bits. Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, somebody's pointed out I've got a great sailing video. Yeah. So
he's a serious bowler, this guy.
Yeah. Does that sort of answer your question there, Stephen?
Absolutely. It's just I'm always amazed that it's so rare for me to meet someone who's has taken a canoe course. Whereas in the UK, if you're canoeing, you probably took a canoe course.
Yeah, yeah.
And it shows. But
one of the nice things that I get nowadays are people that don't want the certificates, never heard of the certificates. I may at some point say, well, it may be useful for you to do that because it will give you markers along the way rather than doing the big thing. But I get people say, we're going to do it. I've got a booking for April sometime, 3 or 4 days. And it's a group of 6 people who want to do, what's the trail that Kay Henry set up in the States? It's like a month, 6 weeks to do. It should be at the top of my head, but I've got to an age where I don't remember these things now. That's the trail they want to go do. And they've done a reasonable amount of paddling, so they're going to come to me for the tips and hints that they need for that context. Which is great.
Yeah. The water trail. Yeah.
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 So there you go.
No, but anyway. Yeah, so I want to leave you with this. One of my great lines I throw at people was from your little bit in This is a Canoe, Justine Goodwin's little DVD there a decade ago, which you said, and I love it, always paddle good strokes, because when you need one, that's all you have. And I love that line. I thank you for that.
Yeah, it's part of my philosophy, and and I'll explain it to other people more because it's one of the most important things that underlie my philosophy as a paddler. I have a philosophy as a coach, I have a philosophy of paddler. But if you always paddle well, if you always paddle with good quality strokes, when the shit hits the fan, you're frightened, you're cold, and it's all going wrong, the only thing you can do is paddle well because you don't know any other way of paddling it.
Beautiful.
People paddle lazy can say, well, I'll up the standard when I need to. It doesn't happen. When you're under pressure, you paddle how you always paddled. So, you will rarely see me paddle anything other than paddle well, because then it becomes totally, utterly ingrained. It's Dennis. This is a thing about it. I've been the subject of research because there's a lot of people doing masters and PhDs, so they look to people like me to come and study and see what we do. And one of the best people that ever did this, one of the top coaches in the UK, a guy called Lowell Collins, he did his doctorate, and he studied people like me and a whole series of people in kayak and canoe and sea kayak. And he said the philosophy was pretty identical throughout. And he was looking at what are under, I think, I'm sure you have a philosophy. A lot of people just go along with it and they never think it through to that extent. But I have a philosophy underlying everything I do, a rationale. There you go, Dennis. I told you I'd go off on that.
I took too long, Dennis. Thank you.
All good. Thanks. Stephen, you know what? If you'd like to stick around in the green room for after the show, feel free to stay in the basement there.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Thanks, Stephen. We'll talk soon.
Really good to talk to you, Stephen.
Awesome. Yeah, I posted the link, everybody, to the episode with Stephen Coots on canoe pulling. Very interesting episode. If you'd like to check that out, by all means, for those of you that may not be aware of even what canoe pulling is, as he mentioned, it seems to be a bit of a dying art, but you know what? There's no reason why that it should be. Everybody should give this a try, including myself. I still got to go down and push a canoe around with him one day. So, Ray, we have another guest in the basement there that I would like to bring up on screen, but he always has his own little intro. So let's do this.
Hi, I'm Kevin Cowan, the Happy Camper.
Woo! Yes, I'm Apostle number 14. Well, if you visited me instead, you would have been fine. It's a one sexy beast, I'm telling you. I called you poopy pants. Sorry about that.
Did you really?
I will hold in my urine for you, Dennis.
You have to remind Kevin that this is a family show.
What about the chipmunks?
Awesome.
Hey, there's our good friend Kevin. How you doing, Kevin?
Woo! Cheers!
This is where the drinking games start, right?
Oh, good man.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I nearly put a selection on the table. I was thinking, if Kevin's there, I want to make him envious.
What do you got? What do you got?
At the moment, I've got Aberlour. I've got a Welsh whiskey. I've got Lagavulin. I've got an 18-year-old Space I forget the canoeing. I've got a Glenmorangie. So there's a good selection, and most of it will still be there if we get it all sorted. So you're over in October.
Yeah.
I will make sure I've got some of the 18-year-old.
So tell people about that. The Open Canoe Symposium. You haven't talked about that all night. It's a big event.
Yeah.
We're trying to get there, Kevin.
Yeah, but the problem is we're really struggling to find anybody of quality to come over. So Kevin's coming for a second time. No, he's great. I love you, Kevin. I love you to bits. And so do the Brits.
Kevin just wants another whiskey tour, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Scotch tour, yeah.
25 years ago, I was watching what the sea kayakers were doing in Britain, and they were holding sea kayak symposiums. And that way, instructors, top-end instructors, would get to meet while running stuff for the ordinary, I say ordinary, but the paddlers. And I thought we should do it. I bloody hate organising big things, but no one else was stepping up to the plate. So I thought is that a North American sort of thing, stepping up to the plate? I don't know. I thought it was a baseball quote. I was trying hard.
Yeah, you got her.
So I organised the first open canoe symposium, and because canoeing is sort of almost is a generic term in Britain, we felt we had to stick the open canoe bit in, the open bit of it. And it's been running for 25 years, and we've rotated it around. So it's my turn this time. Next year we'll be in England, and the year after we'll be back in Scotland. So we've got 3 venues. But the great thing is you've got so many working professional coaches, guides, who will give their time for free for that one weekend. You know, they're the people who make the living at it, but we sort of feel it's a way to throw it back in. And, you know, it was, one of the things you said about it was the number of people who could paddle.
Yeah. So my Canadian synopsis of this event is just this is you need to quit your job and take a holiday in late fall and go to the Open Symposium, because first of all, it's held in Wales one year, Scotland one year, England one year, but the Irish show up, but they don't have their own, and like that's a sin, by the way, but. We all gather, and it is so funny. So, as a Canadian going to this Open Symposium, what you said all night is really interesting. It's all to do with skill set. so they'll spend, you do all these, everybody spreads out after breakfast and they do all these workshops. So it's not just sitting in some lecture, you're doing all these workshops and it's all to do with skill set, right? And then I presented just after the one guy. So the one young kid, he presented on doing this trip in Wales. And I remember him saying, and I did not see anybody for 2 hours on this trip. It was amazing. And that's where everything flips, because you're right, because you guys are so skilled. You can go in an eddy and spin all day and then you get a certificate for it. Canadians are like, well, we could do that. I'm not sure if we did that. We probably did that on the weekend, but I don't remember. And then I presented after that young guy, and it was a great presentation. And I said, yeah, so I went for 28 days and didn't see anybody. The jaws are dropped. People in the UK could not fathom of being in a wilderness area. But I got to say, you were more skilled at doing that than most of us are. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's and there are Brits that are going out, you know, and I was saying to Dennis, you know, in Canadian terms and what I've done, I'm a sort of very moderate paddler. You know, I've done interesting trips, but they're not the big ones up north. And there are Brits going out doing those big ones up north. You know, they're up there 6-7 weeks on wilderness trips. So there are a group there, but I never had the money to take that amount of time off. And I've now got to a point in my life where physically I would struggle, but also I don't need it or want it anymore. You know, 2 weeks on a wilderness trip is great for me now. Yeah.
Well, but I also remember at your open symposium, the Irish guys hanging around, and I did a workshop on putting a tarp up, and they arrived, and there was 12 of them. That's it. The entire group of. Anyway, so I love them to bits, and I went, "Hey guys, so what happens in Ireland when you're on a wilderness trip and it downpours rain?" And the guy goes, "We go to a pub."
Yeah.
Totally different environment. All right, so I got some concrete questions I want to ask you.
Concrete.
Yeah, concrete.
Yeah.
Forget
What are you using the concrete for? Because the mix depends on what you're using it for, Kevin.
Well, to put on your ankles the next time you take me down the bloody Spey River in November. God, Jesus.
Yeah. Okay, question.
All right. So, explain your emotions when you're with Ray Mears on the Miss Nabby and you got the fire going with the bow drop.
Okay.
Just hold on, for the record, we discussed this in the green room, by the way.
Whoa, what happened?
Carry on, Ray.
What?
Well, there you go. You know, I just all right. That's a really useful question, because we'd gone on to the Missinalby on my recommendation, because I thought there was enough interesting places, and you know, we could do the right length trip, because we really didn't want to be traveling too far, because we needed to film and do things, and you know, rather than just blast down a river. And Ray actually turned to me, Ray Mears turned to me, you know, in the hotel beforehand and said, well, he was very late getting to the hotel because they were trying to finish the birch bark canoe. He couldn't shake my hand when he met me because his hand had been using a bloody knife to carve with, and his grip had gone. You know, his grip had gone. Pinnock Smith had really sort of given him the wrong information about how long the boat would take to build. And so the pair of them had worked really hard. So anyway, he said to me, so what do you want to learn on the trip? Because obviously I was, the canoe side, everything was fine. I was going to have big input on that. And I said, well, I've never done fire by friction. I'd like to do fire by friction. So we're on the trip. Fair number of mozzies around. We're a bit concerned with that, but I remembered a campsite where I thought we'd get enough breeze. We ended up there, and Ray says, right, we're going to work on it. So he runs a demonstration, and it's like 2 minutes and he's got a fire going. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. You know, you're watching a world expert doing what he does, and it's just like, so much so that that's in the film, but a lot of people criticize him in comments on YouTube saying, well, he could have shown him how to do it because it's so quick and over and done with. And then they see my struggle. And I thought it was interesting that there am I, a canoe expert. I can, you know, in those days I could really make the canoe dance. I could really good on white water. So I'm seen as the expert. But now, and what I thought would be interesting, I'm going to be a total beginner. I'd never tried it before. And it's quite interesting because I could there's two sides to it. One, I'm trying to learn how to do it, and Ray built it up in stages. But there's a side of me, my brain can step aside from it. And it was like watching myself do it. And I could go, actually, there's 7 things here that I need to coordinate to get right all at the same time to a sufficient degree to make this bloody well work. So I'm using the bow drill and the peg will fly one way, and give it another go, the peg would fly another way. Then I'd get a whiff of bloody smoke and then I'd lose the peg and it's all gone again. And I was beginning to lose it. So in terms of energy, I was on the downhill slope. And we could have come back to it another time. But, you know, I knew I was getting there. And Ray Mears said, well, I knew right from the word go you were going to get it, because it was attitude. And Dennis and I talked about, you know, they're used to, and it's very discredited, have learning styles, pragmatist, reflector, theorist, activist. It's a load of bloody nonsense, because we're all of those things. And it depends what you're learning in what context. But even when we were told we needed to teach that theory, I always said there was a 5th type, which was stubborn bastard learner. And I'm a stubborn bastard learner, and all those other things as well. And eventually I get there, you know, and you start seeing that smoke really beginning to come from the peg, from the base of it. You're beginning to get an ember. And, you know, and the pressure, because you just need to keep it going a little bit longer. And I was sweating, the sweat was pouring off my forehead. So when I lifted the ember, Ray said, don't drip on it, don't drip on it. Put it into my bundle of kindling and start blowing on it. And Ray's still saying, pull back from it, don't drip on it, don't get it wet, because I was pouring sweat. And then it lit. And it's one of those great moments, isn't it? When you do something like that for the first time. It's no different to surfing a wave properly for the first wave time, or getting a good line on a rapid, you know. And you know, so something came into my mind from the Apollo landings, and Houston, we have fire. Why I came up with that, I've no bloody idea. But it was just this huge moment. I was led on my back once the fire was going. I was led on my back, waving my arms and legs in the air. You know, just it was fantastic. But what I think is good about that, and I really urged a lot of my customers when I was teaching how to coach to watch it. They so often saw me as the expert who could make that canoe do what I wanted. I said, you need to see me as a beginner. And that piece of film shows me as a beginner and all the problems and issues that a beginner has. And it's such a valuable experience, because it wasn't just about lighting the fire. It was reminding myself the frustrations of being a beginner.
Well, and that's really interesting. And why I asked you that question is that if you go back to the Spey River trip, what you taught me. So imagine a Canadian going to Wales, and it's you got to say at Ray's place, like chickens run around. It's like, are the chickens there? I'm not sure, but yeah, he lives up on a hill. There's chickens running around. Anyway, we went after the open symposium. We went down the Spey River, and it was constant rapids for 5 days. And you know, like me, you're a talker, and you're talking about the Spey River, and I thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And so I was the newbie, right? And so we head down the rapids, and I do the first run, And I look at you because you're the coach. And do you remember that moment? And it was that time where I eddied in differently. Like I would do that in Canada, but I didn't do that proper in the UK. And you only had one comment in the entire trip about my ability, and I learned a lot from that. Do you remember that?
No.
Really?
Well, I remember having conversations with you, but I'd be interested. But this is the thing, Kevin. I'll fire out a number of things, but it's what the person at the receiving end. I'm not always certain they're going to pick up what I pick up. But
I picked it up because it actually made me get down that river. So on the Spey River, what you taught me was you're not in Canada. You're not in a wilderness journey right now. So you have to look beyond the front of the canoe and figure out what you're going to do beyond that. Because in Canada, like there's a rock there, there's a rock here, there's a sweeper there, whatever. You're in a wilderness trip. Where in Scotland, it's just a free flow of just wild rapids.
Yeah.
And you just said you need to actually figure out what you're going to do downstream as opposed to in front of your bow. And it taught me a lot.
Yeah, but I would argue that's the same on. But that, my respect for you went up even more than it was, because you allowed me to feed you ideas in. And too often a person who is regarded as an expert, like yourself, closes themselves to an outside comment. And so I was quite wary giving you any comment on technique. And I really thought you were wonderful. But if I was on the bonnet plume, exactly the same would apply. You cannot look at the front of the canoe. You've got to be looking beyond. And it's the style of river. And the Spey is a particular style. A lot of the rivers in the northwest are a particular, the Yukon, up in the Northwest Territories. And remember, I've only done 2 trips in that area. So, when I spout on as an expert, be very careful how you value that. But a lot of those rivers will be the same as the Spey, in that you need to know where you're going next, but you need to know where you're going to be going much further down, or you're going to be doing eddies. The thing I really remember telling you, and because you look at the trips you've done on Algonquin, what's the name you give to that big circular trip you do?
Oh, the meanest link.
The meanest link. If you go back 5 years, I'd have loved to have done it. So again, immense respect for that. But there were trips I recommended to people because I didn't like them. But I fancied that. I like the idea of the pain, but it's not going to happen now. The thing I remember talking to, because I am an expeditioner, I'm really good on open water, I'm really good on white water. But because that's not the type of style of paddling that you do, and one of the next videos that I'm going to be editing in the next weeks, I've just got the footage I want. Not quite all that I want, but it's going to have to do. Is that you had this habit when you hit an eddy, you'd stick your paddle in the eddy. And I said, forget that. Get the bloody boat in the eddy. That's the concept, whether you're in a sea kayak, river kayak, or a canoe. It's not about getting the bow in. It's not about getting the paddle in. Get the bloody boat in the eddy. And then once it goes into the eddy, then you can decide what you want to do. Do you want to tighten the turn up? Do you want to open the turn out? Have you got people behind you? Do you want to be in the top of the eddy, the middle of the eddy, the bottom of the eddy, according to situation? And because of the paddling, we're all conditioned to the paddling we do. But you had this thing that you were going to stick your paddle in the eddy, and I was trying to get you. That's the thing that I remember. Stop doing that. Get the boat in there. Concentrate on the boat. So that was just the coach in me wanted to do it.
Yeah, no, I remember that specifically. It was such a cool trip because you think about it, and you're right too. We did that trip we're all professionals, which I really loved because we did solo boats for just logistics, whatever. But it was good. I was in unknown environment. But you've got Justine, amazing world-renowned kayaker. You've got yourself. You got Ray, the bushcraft guy. Never touch his cooking stuff. Oh my Lord, never ever touch his equipment. And then myself, and we're doing this trip, and we got along so well. And it was at the end that was really significant, I thought. We're going towards, we're going towards the sea, right? So you've done the trip, I think, 42 times. You've done that river multiple times, right? And you say to us, well, I've never seen it so bad. Good luck to y'all. And it's like, oh my God. And we're going out to the sea. And the really cool thing is we all dealt with it because we'd all had been on multiple trips before mentally. Because we all had done that. Whatever our skill set was, we got to the end with the gale force winds because we had done it before. And I love that moment.
Yeah, that end I didn't like at all. That was getting to me. And because I knew I was on the limit, and I knew there wasn't anything really spare if it all went wrong. And I knew damn well if anybody else took a swim, they were likely going out to sea, and I wouldn't have gone after them. You know, I'd have been on the phone to the Coast Guard to say, we need a lifeboat out there.
It's so great that you're telling me this now.
Stephen's just he just commented he's going to move to the UK for continuous one. Move to the Yukon, fella. move to British Columbia, move to the Northwest Territories. You get more reliable bloody water. The number of times we got sod all water in the rivers, you know, we're talking about this. It makes, you know, Britain sound like a wonderful place to paddle. And it, why do you think so many of us go to Canada, the Alps, and Nepal and places, and South America? It's because we don't have reliable white water. You know, the Spey is a big river, so you can paddle in when it's low. You can paddle when it's big. But Stephen, don't do it. Move west, mate. Move west.
Okay, gents, we've got about 15 minutes left here in the show, and I got a few questions that I'd like to bring in here. Pardon me?
It's nearly 2:00 in the morning. Hurrah!
I know, my Lord, man. Okay, so
Ray is on UK time, everybody. So.
If Ray can tell everybody, I'll drop out. If Ray can tell everybody about the evils of haggis in his country.
Oh, well, haggis is delightful. You know, as a meal, I love haggis to bits. So you can have haggis properly. I've been to a dinner where the haggis is piped into the hall. So you have a piper in full regalia. The chef comes in with a haggis on a tray and a big sod-off knife that would make most bushcrafters cry with envy. And they recount the Robbie Burns poem to the haggis. But it's a fearsome beast. You know, people laugh at it because it's got longer legs on one side than the other, because you've got clockwise and anti-clockwise haggis on the hill. And
it's all bullshit. It's bullshit.
Kevin, did you meet anybody in Scotland who didn't support this? From the banks of the Spey, the estate workers, to the lady in the Land Rover, did you meet a single What's happened is people believe it's bullshit because they're afeard of the haggis going up the trouser leg, which tells you how brave the Scots are with the kilts. If they get up your trouser leg, mate, you're done for. No, can you tell the truth? Did every single person you meet just give you a story about the haggis?
Oh, everybody, every single person. But I tell you right now, I cannot wait to have you on a trip with me in Canada and a bear kill you to shit. Sorry.
Compared to haggis, mate, I'm really relaxed.
No, I cannot I cannot wait for that moment that I'm sitting around having scotch around the fire with you and a black bear approaches and I go, yeah, get that. That's worse than your haggis, man.
What you got to realize now, a black bear could come and bloody sit by the fire and I wouldn't bloody blink because I'm not going to do it before you blink, right? Yeah, I'm going to bloody psychologically, I'm going to train.
We have a challenge.
Oh
Yeah, I'm
my
gonna
lord!
go,
All right,
I'm gonna go to the bet. I'm gonna go to the. Yeah, I'll bring my gloves.
sorry,
Thanks,
sorry,
Kevin.
Dennis. I'll let someone else
This
come
will
up.
all be good
Yep.
until I see you shitting yourself and running for it, and then I think I've overdone this.
Oh, Kevin, we'll see you in the green room, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, you really have to go on a trip with these guys. They're awesome. Ray, you know what you're doing, but also you know why you're doing it. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers, my friend. Good to speak to you.
All right.
See you in a bit, Kevin.
I'll be sitting there saying, "Kevin, get on with it, mate."
Yeah, I
Sort
know,
him
right?
out.
All right, Ray. So we got just a few more questions here from those in the chat, and they kind of touch on the ones that I have on here. So we'll do these in rapid concession.
And
How's
I'll
that?
try and be quick.
Okay,
I
so
did warn you.
let's see. Camper 69 Gary is asking, what trip do you have the fondest memories of?
Circumnavigation of Wales. It was out
Circumnavigation
there
of
on the
Wales.
edge, and it was with the right partner. We drove hard. We had incredible things. We had some frightening things. It's the most significant trip I've done, I think. I learned so much. It built my reputation, but I can still see things now. 27, 28 years later, some of the things I can see with absolute clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In Canada, I love the big salmon, but blood vein. Been there 4 times, 4 different water levels. Love that to bits.
Wow. The circumnavigation, that was what, 400 mile trip?
400 miles of coastline, but 200 miles inland.
Okay. Wow. And how
and
long
we
did that
it
take?
18 days.
18 days. Wow. That's pretty ambitious.
And we did poling, tracking to go up one river. You got to remember, I was in my mid-40s where I was probably at my strongest. I was with the strongest person I've ever paddled with, who was probably the best expeditioner I've ever met, a guy called Rob Eaglestaff. Absolutely amazing guy. Recreated Shackleton's open boat journey from Elephant Island to South Georgia. He's been all over the place, done so much in Canada. The big trips that he's done in Canada are bigger than anything I've done, and more remote.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Norma
Vince asking, when in Canada, have you ever canoed in Manitoba?
Of course. The blood vein starts in Ontario, but it quickly shows its class and gets into Manitoba. But it does
quickly shows its class.
Great river. And I'd like to do more there. It depends what I can do in the future. Yeah. So yeah, loved it. Blood vein was just tremendous. Very influential on my understanding of wilderness.
Now, I'm guessing with what you just answered there, what's your favorite canoe trip here in Canada? Would that be the blood vein?
It's really hard actually, because I like the blood vein. I'll probably never do it again. Done it 4 times now. Like the Misnabi. The bonnet plume was just spectacular with the mountains all around it. And I really, the thing is, you've got to enjoy what you're doing. So I love the big salmon, and I'm thinking of going out there in the next years because portaging will become harder for me with the heart. But I'd love to do the big salmon with my daughter. We saw so much wildlife, spectacular scenery. Meant to be doing other stuff out there. So yeah, there's stuff in the future, hopefully. Mm-hmm. I love the blood vein, and I love the big salmon. You know, opposite ends of the spectrum, if you like. The big salmon's really grade 1+, 1 stroke, maybe 1/2. You need to be able to paddle because there's sweepers everywhere and it's fast. Yeah.
Cool. Canoe puller is Steven's asking, what do you mean by good paddling?
Oh dear, I think Steven's asked too good a question here. I'm quite happy to go and do a flat water trip. So, you know, I really love the Boundary Waters. Okay, it's in the States. Really enjoyed that. The trip I did with my daughter in Algonquin, I loved. Scenery, I love it. Some of it is about the environment that you're in. So the Big Salmon was just spectacular country, and the paddling was easy for us. The paddling was easy. It was a very experienced foursome, but I just loved being on it. It was wilderness. We didn't see any other people, but the company you're in as well makes the thing. Whereas in the UK, is the river in itself interesting? You know, is it, you know, something like the Tay is a good river and I enjoy the Tay, but it tends to be a hard bit and then masses of flat. Whereas the Spey, there's much more evenness to it. I mean, there is almost a day's worth of flat water paddling for most people. We split it into 2 half days, a bit of white water, half a day flat, then another half day flat, and then into the white. The Spey is much more even, so I love the Spey. And sometimes the good paddling is because it's big and, you know, you're just enjoying the journey. And other days it's because there's lots of technical things that you're enjoying and it intrigues you. And the paddling in itself is good. You're having to make decisions. You're having to move your boat around. You're having to use waves and features. So what do I mean by good paddling? I'd have to think even harder, but there's some ideas.
Cool. And the last question that we have here is, did you see any bears, moose, or lynx on any of your trips?
Yeah. Fortunately, all at a reasonable distance. Again, one of the reasons I loved the big salmon was that we saw lots of moose. They weren't hiding, but very often I'm there in late August or September, so a lot of the bigger wildlife has disappeared back. On the bonnet plume, I think we saw 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 grizzlies, maybe 7 or 8 black bears. But the funniest one on the bonnet plume was we left the lake at the top, and the river's relatively narrow and relatively shallow. If it wasn't for the current, I'm sure you could walk across it, you know, waist deep plus. And we're going down that first part of the river, and a grizzly stood up on the bank, just one bush back from the bank. And it was it wasn't a big, well-fed grizzly. It hadn't been eating loads of bloody salmon and been to the gym very often, but it was tall. It was tall. And probably hadn't seen humans because you don't get a lot of traffic there. And it stood up, its nose was in the air, and it was sniffing. And there were 6 of us, 3 canoes, 6 cameras, loads of digital SLRs. Well, no, it wouldn't have been. It would have been slide film back in the day. And we all looked at this grizzly, and we kept paddling, and we didn't get a single bloody photograph of it because it was that close. We thought, we're not going to mess around. We're going to keep going nice and steadily down the river. But the other thing we saw on that with the grizzlies was a mother bear with her 2 cubs, which we're guessing were about a year old. It was impressive because they saw us. They were back from the bank. They never posed a threat. We didn't feel threatened. And the one cub, because they can be predated on by other grizzlies, the one cub went straight up a bloody bare trunk of a tree at speed. Meanwhile, mum and other cub bolt back into the tree line. And I think the cub that went up the tree probably got 25, 30 feet up and decided mum had gone and it was going down. And I still remember how it slid down this big trunk with its claws raking the trunk as it went, and you could hear the claws in the tree as it slid down. And that sound stuck with me. So although it was only a yearling, it was about the size of a black bear. And you're thinking, if that bastard gives you a clout, and particularly when it's an adult, it's going to take your ribs straight out of your chest. You know, the sheer bloody scale of it. So, yeah. Algonquin, I was disappointed because we were late in the year, late August, so we didn't see any bloody moose at all. It's like, I did say to Gord, can I have my money? But no, I didn't. Yeah, but, you know, I'd love to do something like the big salmon with my daughter so she could see those things. Yeah.
Sure.
So there you go.
Gord Baker from Algonquin Outfitters says hello. How you doing?
Yeah. Hi, Gord. Yeah, I really remember meeting you and you sorting this out. It's been fantastic. And, you know, the bounce around on Facebook has been really good. Really enjoy that, Gord. So keep it up and I'll keep up commenting on your stuff. So
Awesome.
I hope you keep him well.
Well, you know what, Ray, you have a book too that a lot of people may or may not know about. What can you tell us about the book? I do know I have links to Ray's website and his YouTube channel and Instagram and Facebook, and of course to where you can pick up a copy of his book called Canoeing. There we go. Let's go full screen on that.
Let's put it up again. Because let's get it up there. Right. Okay. The cover on the second edition, the cover is from below Big Pine Rapid on the French River. And I'd comment inside of it that, you know, I stand on the shoulders of giants, you know, with Gary and Johnny's book and Bill's book. And again, you gather that Bill was a big bloody hero of mine. There's something, this second edition has got about 950 photographs. And the difference between my book and Bill, one of the differences, I saw Bill's book as a model. And, you know, he's got everybody in the same outfits, they're going back to the same venues, and I thought that's how you should do it. And then I couldn't do that. So it's just, you know, it's picked photographs, discussing techniques that goes everything from poling to flat water paddling to J-strokes to paddling whitewater to traveling in wilderness areas. So, you know, a lot of the photographs are sequences, you know, a la Bill Mason, but the quality of the photograph is better because we've got modern stuff. And it's done pretty well. It's nowhere near in the league of Path of Paddle in terms of its sales, but the times are different. So it's sold about 8,000 copies. Now, if you want it in Canada or North America, I would suggest you don't buy it from me because the postage is more than the book. But on my website, there is a link, or, you know, on my YouTube videos, I don't know if I've got it on the website, there's a company called the Book Depository. And if you find them, they actually sell the book cheaper than I sell it. And they do the postage for free. And they're cheaper than Amazon. You can get it from Amazon, even in Canada. But the Book Depository is the best way of getting it. And the nice thing is I did it at the right time of my paddling, so my ideas were pretty set. So none of the major ideas have changed. But the photographs range from Canada to a lot done in France because of the weather, to Scotland, to England and Wales. There's stuff from the Rio Grande. But it's really a study of technique, psychology, how you do things, how you outfit yourself to go and do it yourself. The issue is, I don't think you can truly learn from a book, however good the person is. And I learned masses from Bill, and I think you can learn masses from mine. If you're an absolute beginner, it's learning from a book. But then I've got my YouTube channel as well. But there you go. There's the book. It's my thoughts on canoeing. Yeah, and when you're somebody like me, when you do something, you want to do it well. And I look at that book and I feel I did that well. So, you know, there you go. You know, when I do things badly, I know I've done it.
Second edition. When did the first edition come out?
It's got to be 10, 11 years ago now. And if it was a child, the birth of that book, you'd never have another child, I assure you. my previous partner, who really helped me with my writing style and finding my voice as a writer, she commented when I was writing articles, it was a painful process. I can now churn them out if I need to. And she said, if you ever write a book, I'm leaving you. Well, she left me anyway. It didn't work out. We're still in contact. But she wouldn't have been disappointed. It was a torturous process to get it out there. But it was interesting. In terms of technique, I normally got the photographs before I wrote the text. So I'd have the photographs up in front of me that I was going to use. Then I'd write the text. And so I really marry up technique of the writing with the photograph. And it was interesting. The MacGuffin's book was very influential on me because the quality of the photographs. The text didn't grab me in the same way, but the photographs did. But when they did the whitewater section, it was obvious they went out over a day or so and just got them. And they didn't always fit the context of the text as neatly as they'd done with the flat water. So I looked at that because when I first saw their book, I thought, what's the point? Because it's so beautiful. And then I looked at it in detail, and I went, no, I could do better than that in this aspect. Because I think their book is very inspirational. So there you go. People can look at it, judge it themselves. Yeah.
Very good.
Retired outside's offered to carry my canoe, which is fantastic.
Yeah, he says, just remember, he's still available if you need a Canadian Sherpa.
Thank you very much.
There you go, Bill. Well, Ray, you know what? Thanks very much for joining us tonight. You know what? It's great to learn a little bit more about yourself. I'd love to do this again sometime and actually talk some technical stuff, some techniques and stuff like that. If we'll save that for down the road. But really quick, what can we expect from Ray Goodwin in 22 here?
My major effort now is going to be, I've had a bit of a hiatus with YouTube the last 2 to 3 months, and I need to there'll be a new one out tomorrow. It's already on YouTube, but I haven't opened it to the public. And it's quite interesting as the body begins to fall apart, and I don't want to compete on some things with the younger coaches. So I'm not retired, but I'm pulling back a long, long way. I've given up on the mountaineering stuff. I no longer sea kayak. I certainly don't whitewater kayak. So all these things that have been exceptionally important to me in my life are beginning to go. And these are the things, because I've, like a lot of people, done well, I had insecurities. I still do. But what the YouTube stuff has done is allowed me to still have worth. So I put it out there. In a British context, I walk into a room, I walk to a launch place, and people walk up to me and say, "Love that video, Ray." So I think in terms of the creativity, a lot of effort down the line on YouTube. I need to get to Canada and see what I can do. And I certainly want to be better at becoming a storyteller. And, I've looked at Lost Lakes. Jonathan, is it, with Lost Lakes?
Yep.
They're in. But Jonathan, I think, is incredible storyteller. The Birds are incredible storytellers. And that's what I want to do, is do some trips and work on this. Because I'm a storyteller, but transferring that into film. So a lot of effort is going to go there. And I've got 1 or 2 things in the UK I still wish to do. So we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. I'm sure John and the Baird boys would be more than thrilled that you threw that compliment their way. They are great storytellers, and they're great adventurers.
Inspirational. And I've learned so much watching them tell the story.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Ray, thanks. Like I said, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Love to do it again sometime.
Thank you, Dennis.
just so everybody knows, we do have links to Ray's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and to where you can pick up a copy of his book. Oh, and his website as well. And that's all in the description below. So if you need to find that out, please do check that out. Ray, I'm just going to put you in the green room, and I'll be back with you in just a moment, if that's good.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
Stay safe and stay healthy. Well, everybody, I hope you you enjoyed the show with somebody so inspirational and legendary as Ray Goodwin. You know what? It's a long-time thrill for me to have somebody like him on the show. As you know, there's a lot of very inspirational and knowledgeable and these guys that just know their stuff, and he is certainly one of them. And it's certainly a pleasure to have him on the show tonight. Just want to thank everybody. I'm looking at my numbers here. I'm at 4,996 subscribers. I'm 4 away from hitting that 5K. If you haven't already done so, please hit the thumbs up. But more importantly, please do hit that subscribe button and join us here every Tuesday evening for another episode of Canoehounds Outdoor Adventure Show. Just as a reminder, next week we have River Kings from Pete from the YouTube channel. River Kings is going to be on next week. We're going to be talking a lot of whitewater kayaking. And yeah, we're going to be having a little bit of fun on that evening as well. So that'll be next Tuesday, which is the 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, that would be about it. Anyways, you know what? Thanks very much for joining once again. This here was episode number 93. We're closing in on that 100th episode, which should happen early March. So yeah, by all means, do stick around for the ride. We're going to be having a good time. So just remember, people, keep the adventures alive, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you all next time.